Even when the war was over, the Jewish situation remained tense. Refugee ships like the Exodus, carrying Holocaust survivors to mandatory Palestine, were turned back. There was violence in the land. The British mandatory power turned to the United Nations, and on the 29th of November 1947, the historic vote took place. By 33 votes to 13, with 10 abstentions, the decision was taken to partition the land between its Jewish and Arab populations. After almost 2,000 years, there would be once again a Jewish state in the land of the patriarchs and prophets. And on the 5th of Iyar 5708, 14th of May 1948, the State of Israel was proclaimed. Was this the hand of God or the work of human beings? Surely it was both. And as we look back at the day the Jewish people became a sovereign nation again, the only adequate words are those of Hallel, that ancient set of psalms of thanksgiving for the miracles of Jewish history. Odecha ki anitani. I will thank you, for you answered me and became my salvation. This is the day that God has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. So many Jewish prayers have been answered for the return to Zion, the ingathering of exiles, the restoration of Jewish sovereignty, and the rebuilding of the Jewish home. What so many generations dreamt of more in hope than expectation, we have seen in our time. And yes, there were the centuries of tears, of hopes not met, dreams not realized, lives lost. Yet the Jewish people did survive. God's promise was fulfilled. The prayers of the ages have come true. So let's end this part of the story with joy, with those ancient words in which our ancestors expressed their faith that God was with them. Ki malachav yitzav elach, he will command his angels about you to guard you in all your ways. May the Lord guard your going out and your return, now and for all time.
זוהי זכותו הטבעית של העם היהודי להיות ככל עם ועם עומד ברשות עצמו במדינתו הריבונית.
The 5th of Iyar 5708, 14th of May 1948, David Ben-Gurion proclaims the State of Israel.
היישוב העברי והתנועה הציונית ביום סיום המנדט הבריטי על ארץ ישראל.
The longest exile ever endured by a people was at an end. After almost 2,000 years of homelessness, the Jewish people came home.
אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל.
It's a story without parallel in history. The story of the love of a people for a land, the love of Jews for Israel. There in ancient times our people was born, and there in modern times our people was reborn. Join me in a journey of music and words as we think of what Israel meant to more than 100 generations of our ancestors and what it means to us. I've chosen some music that moves me. I hope some of it speaks to you. Many of the words are in Ivrit, and you'll find their translation in the accompanying booklet. And though the songs are varied, as the Jewish people is varied, one message runs through them all. Judaism was born in the hope of a land, and Israel is the Jewish land of hope. The journey to Israel was never easy. At the very dawn of our history, almost as soon as Abraham arrived, he was forced by famine to leave. Jacob and his family went into exile in Egypt, where generations later they were enslaved. In the days of Moses, the Israelites made the second great journey to the land. It should have taken a few weeks, but it lasted 40 years. Moses himself died without entering it. Centuries later, the Assyrians conquered the north, and then the Babylonians did the same to the south, destroying the temple and taking many of the people captive. It might have been the end of Jewish history. But in words engraved on the Jewish soul ever since, Jews vowed never to forget where they came from, the land to which God had first called them, the place they called home. Though they no longer lived in the land lived on in them. These were the words they said. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I don't remember you, if I don't consider Jerusalem my highest joy.
אשכחך ירושלים תשכח ימיני תדבק לשוני עולה וחיכי אם לא אזכרכי אם אשכחך ירושלים תשכח ימיני תדבק לשוני עולה וחיכי אם לא אזכרכי אם לא אשכחך ירושלים תשכח ימיני תדבק לשוני מוהילה וחיכי אם לא אזכרכי אם אשכחך ירושלים תשכח ימיני תדבק לשוני מוהילה וחיכי אם לא אזכרכי אם לא שמחתי הראש שמחתי הראש שמחתי
Israel always was a tiny country, home to a tiny people. Yet what our ancestors achieved there transformed the spiritual horizon of humankind. It was there the prophets taught the worship of the one God whose children we are. There that Elijah spoke truth to power. Hosea told of God's love and Amos of his justice. There that Micah said, "What does God ask of you but to act justly and love mercy and walk humbly with your God?" It was there that King David sang psalms and his son Solomon built the temple. And though the people often fell short of the high ideals to which God had summoned them, in generation after generation there arose visionary men and women who recalled the people to their destiny as a holy people in the Holy Land. Their teachings never died and have the power to inspire us still. Here are words our ancestors sang in the temple, thanking God that there they were free to serve God alone. Honor Hashem, truly God, I am your servant, son of your handmaid. You have set me free from my chains.
Ben Amosech
4,000 years ago, one man heard a call. Leave your land, your birthplace, and your father's house, and go to the land I will show you. Those were the first syllables of recorded Jewish time. And in a way I find mysterious, even miraculous, Jews throughout history have heard those words calling to them as they called to Abraham and Sarah to leave their land, birthplace, and father's house and journey to the land of Israel. Few chapters in that story are more dramatic than that of the Jews of Ethiopia, Beta Yisrael. Separated from Jews elsewhere for some 2,000 years, in the 4th century they fled from attempts to convert them to Christianity and settled in the hills of Gondar. They lived a tribal lifestyle. Many of them couldn't read or write, yet they clung to their identity with awesome faith. When violence broke out in Ethiopia in the 1980s, they began their journey back to Israel through the Sudan. It was dangerous, and many died on the way. The voices you're about to hear are those of Ethiopian children who came to Israel. There they met an Israeli musician, Shlomo Gronech, who formed them into the Sheba Choir, based on the tradition that Ethiopian Jews were descendants of Menelik I, the child of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. This unusual song, written by Shlomo Gronech, combines the sounds of Israel with those of Ethiopia, and it's based on an ancient tradition. Each year, migrating storks fly over Ethiopia. The Hebrew for a stork is chasidah, and in Amharic it's called shimala. Seeing the birds flying overhead, the Jewish children would sing them a song, "Stork, stork, how is Jerusalem?" And they dreamt that they too would one day fly to the holy city. Listen to how in our time, Jewish children in Africa heard the call that once summoned Abraham and Sarah. They too left their land, their birthplace, and their father's house to make the Jewish journey to the Jewish land.
Shimala, Shimala, Agarachin Jerusalem Dana.
Apartheid.
Jews returned from Babylon and rebuilt the temple, but they were conquered again by the Greeks. In the days of the Maccabees, they regained their independence, but it was short-lived, and they came under the rule of Rome. In year 66 of the Common Era, they rebelled, hoping to repeat the victory of the Maccabees, but they were defeated, and for a second time, the temple was destroyed. They rebelled again in the days of Bar Kokhba and were defeated again. So began the longest exile ever experienced by a people. For 1800 years, Jews were dispersed around the world, everywhere a minority, wandering from place to place in search of safety and a place to live. It was a history of terrible suffering, and it added new words to the lexicon of tragedy, expulsion, disputation, forced conversion, inquisition, autodafé, ghetto, and pogrom. And though they kept faith, there were times when they cried out from the depths of despair, Elohim Sheli, my God, where are you? This is a song written around that cry, sung by Gad Elbaz.
מי זה לצידי פוסע, מרחקים גדולים גומע, עקבותיו כאן נטבעו על פני החול. כף ידו אותי תומכת, בדרכים גופי סומכת, יש בי אמונה שהוא הכל יכול. אך מדוע בביתו צרה, זוג של עקבות אחד נראה, למה תעזוב ידינו אלוקים שלי, התלאות קשות לי, קשלה רגלי, למה תעזוב ידינו אלוקים שלי, אין לי כוח להמשיך כאן לבדי.
אלוקים שמע קולנו, וכמו אבלי תפרושנו, אל תבכה אהוב שלי, הקשב ילדי. כשכמעט קראת דרך, אז לך סללתי דרך, בזרועותיי אותך נשאתי על ידי. אך מדוע ילד ביתו צרה, כיתום מאב תבקש עזרה,
אז לך סללתי דרך,
אין איתך אני לנצח ילדי שלי, רק אמור מילה גם תבקש ידי, כן איתך אני לנצח ילדי שלי, רק שא תפילה לאלוקים שלי, אלוקים
זה לצידי פוסע, מרחקים גדולים גומע, עקבותיו כאן נטבעו על פני החול. כף ידו תומכת, בדרכים גופי סומכת, יש בי אמונה שהוא הכל יכול. אך מדוע בא ביתו צרה, זוג של עקבות אחד נראה, למה תעזוב ידינו אלוקים שלי, התלאות קשות לי, קשלה רגלי, למה תעזוב ידינו אלוקים שלי, אין לי כוח להמשיך כאן לבדי.
אלוקים שמע קולנו, וכמו אב ליטף ראשנו, אל תבכה אהוב שלי, הקשב ילדי. כשכמעט קראת הדרך, אז לך סללתי דרך, בזרועותיי אותך נשאתי על ידי. אך מדוע ילד ואיתו צרה, כיתום מאב תבקש עזרה,
אז לך סללתי דרך,
אין איתך אני לנצח ילדי שלי, רק אמור מילה גם תבקש ידי, כן איתך אני לנצח ילדי שלי, רק שא תפילה לאלוקים שלי,
Never did the Jewish people leave Israel voluntarily, and there were places they never left at all. Throughout the Middle Ages until modern times, when they could, they returned, as they'd returned from Egypt and from Babylon. Judah Halevi set sail to go there in 1140, though we don't know if he reached his destination. Maimonides and his family went there in 1165, though they were unable to stay in a land ravaged by the Crusaders. Nachmanides went in 1267 and revived the Jewish community in Jerusalem. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Jews came from Spain and Portugal. The community in Tzfat became a world center of Jewish scholarship and mysticism. And then in the 17th century, they came from the Ukraine after the massacres of 1648. In the 18th century, disciples of both the Baal Shem Tov and the Vilna Gaon made their way to the land. And in the 19th century, Aliyah became not a pilgrimage of the few, but a movement of the many. Jews never relinquished the dream of return. Wherever they were, they prayed about Israel and facing Israel. The Jewish people was the circumference of a circle at whose center was the Holy Land and Jerusalem, the holy city. For centuries, they lived suspended between memory and hope, sustained by the promise that one day God would bring them back. Here's a song whose words were written in Tzfat in the 16th century by the Jewish mystic Rabbi Eliezer Azikri. It's one of the most beautiful poems in Hebrew literature, a song of the love between Israel and God, Yedid Nefesh, beloved of the soul.
Nefeshav harachaman, Yedid nefeshav harachaman, Mishuchav decha, Eretzonecha, Mishuchav decha, la 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 la, Eretzonecha. Yarutz avdecha kemayam, Ishtachave laylay, galalay laylay, el muladarecha. Yarutz avdecha harachaman, Yedid nefeshav harachaman, Mishuchav decha, Eretzonecha, Mishuchav decha, ya la 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 la, Eretzonecha. Avdecha kemayam, Ishtachave laylay, la 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 la, el muladarecha. Yarutz avdecha kemayam, Ishtachave
In 1799, in the midst of his Middle East campaign, Napoleon called on Jews to return to their land. And during the 19th century, the great age of European nationalism, others began to think that way too. There were the religious Zionists, Rabbi Yehuda Alkalai and Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Kalischer, who read the mood of the age and heard the call to Jews to re-establish themselves as a nation in their own land. There were Christian visionaries, statesmen like Lord Palmerston and Lord Shaftesbury, who felt likewise. In 1876, the Victorian writer George Eliot wrote one of the first Zionist novels, Daniel Deronda. Then, a disturbing new phenomenon began to appear. The European Enlightenment was supposed to end the prejudices of the past, but it didn't. A new and deadly prejudice was born. In 1879, it was given a name, anti-Semitism. And now a third voice began to be heard, from Judah Lev Pinsker after the 1881 Russian pogroms, and Theodor Herzl after the Dreyfus trial in France in 1895, warning that Europe was becoming unsafe for Jews. So an ancient dream and a contemporary nightmare came together, calling Jews back to the land of their beginnings, just as the prophet Isaiah had said 27 centuries earlier. In that day, a great shofar will sound, and those who are perishing in exile will come and worship God on the holy mountain in Jerusalem. Here are those words, sung by one of the great Jewish musicians of the 20th century, the late Reb Shlomo Carlebach.
והיה ביום ההוא, והיה ביום ההוא, איתו בשופר גדול, בשופר גדול. ובאו העובדים בארץ אשור, והנידחים בארץ מצרים. ובאו העובדים בארץ אשור, והנידחים בארץ מצרים. והשתחוו להשם בהר הקודש, והשתחוו להשם בהר הקודש, והשתחוו להשם בהר הקודש, והשתחוו להשם בהר הקודש, בירושלים, בירושלים, בירושלים,
Then came 1933 and the rise to power of Hitler and the Nazis. No one who had read or heard his words could doubt the danger. Anti-Semitism was at the heart of his campaign, and laws against Jews among the first of his acts. Gradually, inexorably, Jews were deprived of their rights, their jobs, their freedoms. They were spoken of as lice, vermin, a cancer in the body of the German nation that had to be surgically removed. A major humanitarian catastrophe was in the making, and everyone knew it. In July 1938, political leaders throughout the world gathered in the French town of Evian to discuss ways of saving the Jews. None was forthcoming. Nation after nation shut its doors. Millions of Jews were in danger, and there was nowhere they could go. On all the vast surface of the earth, there was not 1 inch Jews could call home, in the sense given by the poet Robert Frost, as the place where, when you have to go there, they have to let you in. The next piece of music is a poem written by one of the heroes of the 20th century, Hannah Senesh, a young woman from Hungary who made Aliyah in 1939. In 1943, she enlisted in the British Army, and in March 1944, she and 2 men were parachuted into Yugoslavia to help save the Jews of Hungary about to be deported to Auschwitz. When they landed, they discovered that the Germans had already invaded. The men called off the mission, but Hannah Senesh continued alone. She was arrested, tortured, and executed by the Germans. She was 23 years old. This was one of the poems she left behind. Kaylee, Kaylee, my God, may these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of man.
שלא ייגמר לעולם החול והים רשרוש של המים ברק השמיים
As the smoke of war cleared in 1945, as the Russians entered Auschwitz and the British Bergen-Belsen, slowly people began to understand the enormity of what had happened. A third of world Jewry had gone up in flames. Entire worlds, the bustling Jewish townships of Eastern Europe, the Talmudic academies, the courts of the Jewish mystics, the Yiddish-speaking masses, the urbane Jews of Austria and Germany, the Jews of Poland who had lived among their Gentile neighbors for 800 years, the legendary synagogues and houses of study, all were erased. 1.5 million children had been murdered, not just because of their faith or their parents' faith, but because one of their grandparents had been a Jew. When the destruction, the Shoah, was over, a pillar of cloud marked the place where Europe's Jews had once been, and a silence that consumed all words. Sholem Katz was a chazan who was taken to a concentration camp. He, along with 2,000 other Jews, was ordered to be shot. Before they did so, the Nazis made the men dig their own graves. As they stood there waiting for the end, Katz asked permission to sing Keil Mole Rachamim, the memorial prayer for the dead. They agreed. Katz sang so movingly that the Nazi officials kept him alive and he survived the war. Years later, he returned to the camp to sing the Keil Mole Rachamim for the 6 million Jews who did not survive. This is Sholem Katz singing that prayer.
Am Zeh menachem Enough